I still remember the afternoon I came home to find Patricia Belmont, our HOA president, crouched in my living room with a tote bag full of my belongings. She was muttering something about color coordination while rifling through my bookshelf. The woman had no idea that 3 hidden cameras were recording her every move. 2 hours later, I watched from my front window as police officers led her away in handcuffs, her perfectly pressed blazer wrinkled from the metal restraints. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how the most controlling woman in Maple Grove Estates finally met her match. When I moved into my house on Sycamore Lane 3 years ago, I thought I'd found the perfect neighborhood. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained lawns, and friendly neighbors who waved when you passed by. The HOA seemed reasonable enough, with standard rules about lawn height and exterior paint colors. I'm a detail-oriented person by nature, so following the guidelines wasn't a problem. My grass stayed at exactly 2.5 inches. My mailbox matched the approved shade of forest green. I even made sure my holiday decorations came down by January 2nd, as specified in Section 12.4 of the Homeowners Handbook. Everything changed when Patricia Belmont was elected HOA president 18 months ago. Patricia was a real estate agent in her early 50s who treated the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. Within weeks of taking office, she started issuing violation notices for things that weren't even in the rulebook. My neighbor received a warning because his doormat was too whimsical. Another family got cited for having excessively cheerful garden gnomes. Patricia would patrol the streets every morning and evening, clipboard in hand, searching for infractions that existed only in her imagination. My first encounter with Patricia's peculiar brand of tyranny came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was drinking coffee on my porch when she marched up my driveway, her heels clicking against the concrete with military precision. "Mr. Davidson," she said in a tone that suggested I'd committed some terrible crime, "we need to discuss your window treatments." I glanced at my windows, confused. I had simple white blinds, nothing fancy or unusual. "They're creating an asymmetrical appearance from the street," she continued, gesturing dramatically with her clipboard. "The slats on your living room blinds are angled differently than the ones in your bedroom." I thought she was joking at first. When I realized she was serious, I tried reasoning with her. "Patricia, there's nothing in the HOA guidelines about blind angles. I've read the entire document twice." Her face turned red, and she jabbed her pen at me like a weapon. "The guidelines clearly state that homes must maintain a harmonious appearance. Your blinds are disrupting the visual flow of the entire block." That's when I knew I was dealing with someone who had completely lost touch with reality. Over the next few months, the violations kept coming. My porch had excessive decorative elements, because I'd hung a small wind chime my daughter made in art class. My flower pots were inconsistent with neighborhood aesthetics, even though they were plain terracotta, just like half the houses on our street. Each notice came with increasingly aggressive language and threats of fines. Patricia would often stand on the sidewalk in front of my house, taking photos and making notes on her ever-present clipboard. The turning point came in early June when I started noticing things were off. My wind chime disappeared one morning while I was at work. A week later, I found my flower pots rearranged in what Patricia probably considered a more aesthetically pleasing configuration. Small decorative stones I'd placed around my garden beds had been removed. At first, I thought maybe I was misremembering where I'd put things, but when I found a note taped to my back window that read, "This frosted glass is not approved," in Patricia's distinctive handwriting, I knew something more sinister was happening. I mentioned my suspicions to my neighbor, Robert Kessler, who lived 2 houses down. His eyes widened, and he leaned in close. "You too?" I thought I was going crazy. Last month, my wife's garden flamingo vanished, and we found it in our trash can 3 days later. We have a locked gate, so someone had to climb over or pick the lock. That's when I realized Patricia wasn't just sending nasty letters anymore. She was trespassing on our properties and taking matters into her own hands. The decision to install security cameras was easy after that conversation. I ordered a set of high-definition cameras with motion detection and night vision capabilities. I placed one in my living room, hidden inside a decorative vase on my bookshelf. Another went in my kitchen, disguised as part of my smoke detector. The third I mounted outside, tucked under the eave where it had a clear view of both my front and back doors. I made sure they were all connected to a cloud storage system that would save footage automatically. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. I started to wonder if I'd overreacted, if maybe Patricia had gotten the message somehow and decided to back off. Then came the afternoon of June 23rd. I was at a client meeting downtown when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from my security system. I ignored it at first, assuming it was just a delivery or maybe a neighbor's cat. But when the alerts kept coming, I excused myself and checked the live feed on my phone. My blood ran cold as I watched Patricia Belmont use bolt cutters on my back gate. She was wearing dark sunglasses and had her hair pulled back in a tight bun, like some sort of suburban spy. After cutting through the lock, she crept across my backyard and went straight to my kitchen window. To my horror, she produced a thin piece of metal from her pocket and began working on the window latch. Within minutes, she had it open and was climbing inside my home. I immediately called 911, my hands shaking as I explained the situation to the dispatcher. Someone is breaking into my house right now. I can see them on my security camera. It's the HOA president from my neighborhood. The dispatcher seemed confused at first, probably wondering why an HOA president would break into someone's home, but she sent officers immediately when I emphasized that this was an active burglary in progress. As I raced home, I kept watching the feed on my phone. Patricia moved through my house like she owned it, opening drawers and cabinets with casual confidence. She had brought a large tote bag with Maple Grove HOA embroidered on the side, and she began filling it with items she deemed violations. My daughter's wind chime went in first, followed by some decorative cushions for my couch that were apparently the wrong shade of beige. She even took a small succulent from my kitchen windowsill, shaking her head in disgust as she dropped it into her bag. The most surreal part was watching her document everything. She pulled out her phone and took photos of each item before removing it, occasionally pausing to type what I assumed were notes about the violations. At one point, she actually sat down at my dining table and used my own pen to fill out violation notices, which she then placed prominently on my coffee table. The woman was so convinced of her authority that she was creating a paper trail of her own crimes. I arrived home just as 2 police cruisers pulled up to my house. Officers Davis and Chen looked skeptical when I breathlessly explained that the HOA president was currently inside my home stealing my decorations, but their expressions changed when I showed them the live feed on my phone. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to stay in your car while we handle this," Officer Davis said, his hand moving to his radio. "This is a burglary in progress, and we don't know if the suspect might be dangerous." I watched from my car as the officers approached my front door. Through my security camera feed, I could see Patricia still inside, now examining my bookshelf with a critical eye. The officers knocked loudly, announcing themselves as police. The look on Patricia's face when she heard those words was priceless. She froze mid-reach for what I think was a photo album, her eyes wide with panic. For a moment, she seemed to consider hiding, but then her usual arrogance took over. She straightened her blazer, grabbed her tote bag of stolen items, and walked to the front door like she was about to greet guests at a dinner party. "Officers, I can explain," Patricia said in her most authoritative voice as she opened the door. "I'm the HOA president, and I have every right to inspect properties for violations. Mr. Davidson has been flagrantly disregarding our community standards, and I was simply documenting the infractions." Officer Chen's eyebrows shot up. "Ma'am, are you admitting that you broke into this residence?" Patricia's confidence wavered slightly. "I didn't break in. I used my authority as HOA president to conduct a necessary inspection." What happened next was like something out of a crime drama. Officer Davis asked Patricia to step outside, which she did while still clutching her tote bag full of my belongings. When he asked to see what was in the bag, she huffed indignantly but complied. Out came my wind chime, my cushions, my succulent, and even a small wooden sign that said, "Home Sweet Home," that she must have grabbed from my hallway. "These are all HOA violations," she insisted, as if that explained everything. "I was removing them for the good of the neighborhood." Officer Chen pulled me aside while Officer Davis continued questioning Patricia. "Sir, I need to verify a few things. This woman does not live here, correct?" I confirmed that she did not. "And did you give her permission to enter your home?" I shook my head emphatically. "Did she have a key?" Another no. So she broke in through your window after cutting your gate lock? When I showed him the security footage on my phone, his expression hardened. Sir, this is breaking and entering, burglary, and destruction of property. We'll need copies of all your security footage. The moment when Officer Davis informed Patricia that she was under arrest was one I'll never forget. Her face went from red to white to purple in the span of seconds. "You can't arrest me," she shrieked, her controlled demeanor finally cracking. "I'm the HOA president. I was doing my job. This is ridiculous." But Officer Davis was already pulling out his handcuffs. "Ma'am, turn around and put your hands behind your back." The sight of Patricia Belmont, the terror of Maple Grove Estates, being handcuffed in my front yard while several neighbors watched from their windows was oddly satisfying. As they led her to the police car, Patricia kept rambling about violations and community standards. "You don't understand," she called out to me over her shoulder. "Your blinds. Your decorations. They're ruining property values." Officer Chen assured me they would need a full statement and copies of all security footage, which I gladly provided. Several neighbors had come outside by then, watching in stunned silence as their HOA president was driven away in the back of a police cruiser. The story spread through Maple Grove Estates like wildfire. Within hours, my phone was ringing non-stop with neighbors sharing their own Patricia horror stories. Robert Kessler revealed that he'd installed cameras too after the Garden Flamingo incident and had footage of Patricia trespassing in his backyard. The Johnsons from Oak Street said she'd entered their garage and rearranged their tools because they weren't stored symmetrically. Even sweet elderly Mrs. Patterson admitted that Patricia had been inside her house, claiming she was checking for safety violations but actually removing her collection of ceramic cats. By the next morning, the local news had picked up the story. HOA president arrested for breaking into homes made for great headlines, especially when reporters got hold of some of my security footage. The video of Patricia climbing through my window with her HOA tote bag went viral on social media. Someone even made a meme of her mugshot with the caption, "When you take your job too seriously." The media attention brought even more victims forward, creating an avalanche of evidence against Patricia. The emergency HOA meeting 3 days later was standing room only. The remaining board members, clearly embarrassed by the situation, tried to maintain order as angry homeowners demanded answers. How long had Patricia been entering homes? Did the board know about her behavior? Who gave her the authority to interpret rules that didn't exist? The meeting descended into chaos when someone suggested checking the HOA's financial records, and it was discovered that Patricia had been using association funds to purchase bolt cutters, lock-picking tools, and other equipment for her illegal inspections. Patricia's arraignment was scheduled for the following Monday. She showed up in the same blazer she'd worn during the break-in, flanked by an expensive-looking lawyer. The charges were serious: 15 counts of breaking and entering, 15 counts of burglary, 1 count of destruction of property from my gate, and misappropriation of HOA funds. The prosecutor, a no-nonsense woman named Janet Huang, presented the security footage and testimony from multiple homeowners. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue that she believed she had implied consent as HOA president, but Judge Morrison wasn't having any of it. "Miss Belmont," the judge said sternly, "being an HOA president does not give you the right to break into people's homes. It doesn't give you the right to take their property. And it certainly doesn't give you the right to use association funds for criminal activities." Patricia tried to interrupt, but her lawyer quickly silenced her. The judge continued, "The evidence against you is overwhelming. You've admitted to entering these homes, you were caught on camera, and you documented your own crimes. This shows a pattern of behavior that is both criminal and deeply disturbing." The trial date was set for September, but Patricia's problems mounted quickly. The State Real Estate Commission suspended her license pending the outcome of the criminal case. Her brokerage fired her immediately, not wanting to be associated with someone who broke into clients' homes. The HOA board held an emergency vote and removed her from her position, then began the process of reviewing every violation notice she'd issued during her tenure. Most were thrown out as baseless, and several homeowners began preparing civil lawsuits for harassment and emotional distress. As September approached, Patricia's lawyer reached out about a plea deal. The evidence was so overwhelming that going to trial would likely result in maximum sentences on all counts. Prosecutor Huang offered a deal: plead guilty to 5 counts of breaking and entering and 1 count of misappropriation of funds, serve 18 months in minimum security prison, pay full restitution to all victims, and perform 300 hours of community service. Patricia initially refused, still insisting she'd done nothing wrong, but her lawyer eventually convinced her that facing 15 burglary charges at trial could result in decades behind bars. The day Patricia Belmont stood before Judge Morrison to enter her guilty plea was packed with Maple Grove residents. She looked smaller somehow, her usual confidence replaced by hunched shoulders and downcast eyes. As part of the plea agreement, she had to allocute to her crimes, admitting in detail what she had done. "I entered homes without permission," she said in a barely audible voice. "I took property that didn't belong to me. I used HOA funds for personal purposes." Each admission seemed to physically pain her, as if acknowledging her crimes was worse than the punishment itself. Judge Morrison accepted the plea but had strong words during sentencing. "Miss Belmont, you violated the most fundamental trust in a community. Your neighbors should feel safe in their homes, not wonder if their HOA president is going to break in while they're at work. You abused your position of authority in a way that has damaged the fabric of your community." The sentence of 18 months incarceration, $30,000 in restitution, and 300 hours of community service reflects the seriousness of your crimes. As the judge read the sentence, Patricia's face crumbled. The reality of spending a year and a half in prison finally hit her. She turned to look at the gallery full of her former neighbors, perhaps hoping for sympathy, but found only stern faces and crossed arms. When the bailiff approached to take her into custody, she began to sob, her carefully styled hair falling loose as she shook her head in disbelief. The woman who had terrorized Maple Grove Estates for 18 months was led away in handcuffs, facing the consequences of her obsessive need for control.